The desert heat shimmered across the shooting range at 29 palms, distorting the observation platform where General Barrett stood with 12 hand-selected shooters. Corporal Maya Chun adjusted her clipboard and stayed back near the ammunition table, her role clear. Range safety officer. Nothing more. Staff Sergeant Roderick leaned against the railing, eyeing the target downrange. 2670 meters. The number hung in the air like a challenge none of them had faced before. He glanced at the other shooters, all staff sergeants and gunnery sergeants, all with deployment patches and sniper qualifications stitched into their records. The general's voice cut through the morning air. We have 72 hours to identify a shooter capable of this range. The mission parameters are non-negotiable. Wind conditions similar to what you see today. Single shot capability required. Gunnery Sergeant Palmer crossed his arms. Sir, 2670 is beyond standard engagement ranges. Most of us have confirmed kills around 1800. The general nodded. I'm aware. That's why you're here. 12 of the best shooters in the division. One of you will make this shot. Maya watched from her position, mental calculations already forming. The wind patterns out here shifted every 40 seconds. The mirage at this distance created a 3-foot deviation window. She'd watched these conditions for 6 months, every day, logging data nobody asked for. $20, says Henderson gets it first try, Roderick said. Guy's got a confirmed kill at 1900. Palmer shook his head. Jackson's your man. 2,000 meters in Helmand Province. Documented. Maya made a note on her clipboard. Wind speed holding at 12 knots from the southwest. The shooters were focused on their credentials, their past successes. None of them were reading the conditions. Roderick noticed her writing. Hey, safety girl. You keeping score or something? Just noting conditions for the record, sir. He smirked. Make sure you note when Henderson here makes you all witnesses to history. The other shooters laughed. Maya kept her expression neutral. She'd learned that response in her first week here. Stay quiet. Stay invisible. Let them assume. Now here's a question for anyone watching from somewhere with desert conditions like these. Where are you watching from today? Drop your state in the comments. I'm curious how many of you know this kind of heat, this kind of wind that changes everything. General Barrett stepped to the center of the platform. Gentlemen, and he paused, glancing at Maya, before continuing, we begin immediately. Henderson, you're first. The staff sergeant moved to the rifle, a custom M107 setup with a Leopold scope. Maya watched his positioning. Grip too tight. Breathing unsteady. He was thinking about the audience behind him instead of the target ahead. Henderson settled in, made his adjustments, and fired. The sound cracked across the range. For seconds of silence as the round traveled. The spotter called it. Mississippi. 2 meters left, 1 meter low. Roderick frowned. Wind got him. Palmer stepped up next. He took longer, more deliberate. Maya saw him reference a ballistic calculator, punching in numbers. But he was using standard formulas. This range required reading the terrain, the heat waves, the way the wind hit the berms at 1,400 meters, and created an updraft. Palmer fired. Mississippi. 3 meters right. The general's jaw tightened. Next. One by one, they stepped up. Staff Sergeant Jackson. Gunnery Sergeant Torres. Each one confident. Each one missing. Maya recorded every shot, every wind shift, every change in the mirage pattern. By the 8th shooter, the platform had gone quiet. The joke stopped. The swagger faded. Roderick finally took his position. He'd been talking the biggest game. Now he lay behind the rifle, sweat on his forehead despite the dry air. He fired. Mississippi. The spotter didn't even need to call the distance. It was nowhere close. The general looked at his watch. We have 3 more attempts today. Then we regroup and assess alternatives. Maya glanced at her notes. She had 17 pages of wind data, 6 months of observation. She knew this range better than anyone on the platform. But she also knew what happened when a corporal with a clipboard spoke up in a room full of senior enlisted snipers. She stayed quiet. For now. The morning stretched into afternoon. 3 more shooters took their positions. 3 more misses. The confidence that filled the platform at dawn had evaporated like water on the hot steel railing. Staff Sergeant Kowalski packed his gear without a word. He'd fired twice, both rounds sailing wide by margins that suggested he'd miscalculated something fundamental. Gunnery Sergeant Palmer stood near the scope, reviewing his data again as if the numbers would somehow change and explain his failure. Maya moved along the firing line, checking ammunition counts and recording details. Her official duties, the ones that kept her present but peripheral. She watched Henderson attempt a second shot, saw him overcompensate for his first miss. The round fell short this time. Roderick appeared at her shoulder. Still taking notes, Chun? Yes, sir. Range protocols require documentation of all attempts. He looked at her clipboard, at the columns of numbers and observations she'd filled in. That's a lot of detail for protocol. She kept her expression blank. Thorough records help identify patterns, sir. Patterns? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. The pattern is this: shot's impossible in these conditions. Winds shifting every minute. Mirage is playing tricks at this distance. Even our best guys can't compensate for all the variables. Maya said nothing. She'd identified the pattern 3 shots ago. The wind wasn't shifting randomly. It followed a 40-second cycle based on how the heat built in the valley and vented through the canyon to the west. The Mirage cleared for approximately 8 seconds at the top of each cycle. Anyone watching for it would see the window. Palmer approached the general. Sir, recommendation. We postpone until evening when conditions stabilize. General Barrett shook his head. The mission won't wait for ideal conditions. We need someone who can shoot in exactly this environment. Then with respect, sir, Palmer said, we might need to expand the candidate pool. Bring in shooters from other divisions. Camp Pendleton has instructors who might have experience at this range. The general considered this. Maya saw his frustration. Time was the enemy here as much as distance. She glanced at her watch. The wind cycle had held consistent for 6 hours now. It would continue until the temperature dropped at sunset, another 4 hours away. Jackson took his third attempt. He'd been the most confident at the start, the one with the documented tooth centimeter kill. Now his hands shook slightly as he adjusted the scope. The shot broke. Another miss. How many's that? Henderson asked. 12 attempts, 9 shooters. Maya answered before she could stop herself. The platform went quiet. Roderick turned to look at her. You counting failures, Corporal? She met his gaze. Counting attempts, sir. For the record. Palmer stepped closer. You got something to say, Chun? She felt the weight of their attention. Every instinct told her to back down, to apologize, to retreat into her assigned role. But she'd spent 6 months watching this range. She'd logged more hours observing these exact conditions than all of them combined. Just that the wind pattern's been consistent, sir. Repeating cycle every 40 seconds. Palmer's eyes narrowed. You think you've figured out something 12 qualified snipers missed? Not missed, sir. Just maybe not watching for it specifically. Roderick crossed his arms. She thinks she could do better. That's adorable. I didn't say that, sir. But you're thinking it. He looked at the other shooters, inviting them to share his amusement. Safety officer thinks she's a sniper now. Henderson laughed. Come on, Roderick. Give her a break. She's just doing her job. Her job is checking ammunition and making sure nobody shoots themselves in the foot. Palmer's voice had an edge to it now. Her job isn't tactical analysis. Maya returned her attention to her clipboard. Noted, sir. The general watched this exchange without comment. He turned back to the range, to the target that remained unmarked despite 12 attempts. Chun. She looked up. Sir? These observations about the wind pattern. You've documented them? Yes, sir. 6 months of daily logs. Show me. She handed him her clipboard. He flipped through pages of data, wind speeds correlated with temperature changes, mirage patterns mapped to time of day, trajectory calculations accounting for the elevation change between the platform and the target. It was more comprehensive than anything the shooters had brought with them. Why 6 months of this? He asked. She hesitated. Because nobody else was tracking it, sir. And because I wanted to understand the range. Wanted to or needed to? Both, sir. The general handed back her clipboard. Palmer, one more attempt. User wind data. Palmer's jaw clenched. Sir, I don't need a corporal's notes to make my shot. Then you won't mind confirming what she's observed. Make the attempt. Palmer took position behind the rifle. He glanced at Maya's notes, at the 40-second cycle notation. She saw him check his watch, saw him waiting. The wind shifted. He fired. The round struck closer than any previous attempt, but still missed by half a meter. Better, the general said. Still not enough. The sun climbed higher. The heat intensified, and Maya stayed at her position, watching the clock, watching the wind, knowing exactly when the next perfect window would open. The afternoon heat pressed down on the observation platform like a physical weight. 13 attempts now. Still no hit. The shooters had moved from confident to frustrated to something approaching desperate. Maya watched Staff Sergeant Martinez take his position, the 10th shooter to try. He was methodical, checking and rechecking every variable. She appreciated that about him. No swagger, just focus. Martinez fired. The spotter called a miss before Maya even saw the dust kick up downrange. 4 meters high. General Barrett's phone buzzed. He stepped away from the group, his voice low but urgent. Maya caught fragments. Timeline compressed. Operational window narrowing. Need confirmation of capability. Warrant Officer Green appeared beside her. He'd been running the spotting scope all morning, calling each miss with increasing weariness. You shoot, Chun? The question caught her off guard. Some, sir. Recreationally or trained? Trained. Qualified expert with M4, marksman with M40. He raised an eyebrow. Marksman's not bad. You ever try for sniper school? She kept her eyes on the range. Didn't seem like the right time, sir. He followed her gaze, understanding the unspoken. Right? Well, for what it's worth, your wind data helped Palmer get closer than anyone else. Not close enough, sir. No, not yet. The general returned, his expression harder than before. Gentlemen, we have 14 more attempts before I need to make a command decision. Let's make them count. 14 more attempts meant the remaining 3 shooters would each get multiple tries. Maya did the math. If they maintained the current pattern, they'd burn through those attempts in less than 3 hours. Then what? She knew what happened when operations ran out of time and options. Plans changed. Missions compromised. People died because someone couldn't make the shot when it mattered. Staff Sergeant Vega took his second attempt. He'd adjusted based on Palmer's near miss, trying to replicate the wind timing. But he fired 2 seconds early before the mirage cleared. The round went wide. Henderson tried again. Then Torres. The afternoon wore on. Attempt 17. 18. 19. The target remained untouched. Maya filled another page in her notebook. The wind cycle hadn't deviated once. 40 seconds. Consistent as a heartbeat. But consistency didn't matter if the shooters couldn't read the exact moment to fire. Roderick slumped against the railing. This is insane. Maybe the general needs to accept that this shot's beyond current capability. Palmer shook his head. Someone somewhere can make it. Just not us. Maya wanted to speak. The words formed in her mind, clear and simple. I can make it. But she'd learned the cost of speaking up in her last unit. The sideways looks. The extra duties. The quiet ways men made you pay for stepping outside the lines they'd drawn. So she stayed silent and watched the sun arc across the sky. Green checked his equipment, adjusted the spotting scope for the 20th time. He glanced at Maya. You see something we're missing? She hesitated. The mirage, sir. There's an 8-second window at the peak of each wind cycle where it clears completely. That's the shot window. 8 seconds isn't much time. It's enough if you're ready for it. He studied her face. You've been timing it. For 6 months, sir. He turned back to his scope without comment. But she saw him check his watch on the next wind cycle. Saw him note when the mirage cleared. 8 seconds. Exactly as she'd said. Attempt 21. Kowalski's third try. He'd studied Maya's notes between rounds, asked her questions about the temperature gradient and how it affected the bullet's trajectory at extreme range. She'd answered carefully, aware that Palmer was listening, that Roderick was watching with that same amused skepticism he'd shown all day. Kowalski fired. Closer. The spotter called it 1.5 meters low, half a meter right. Progress, but not enough. The general checked his watch again. Time was running out in more ways than one. Maya could feel it in the tension on the platform, in the way the shooters moved with less confidence, in the general's increasingly frequent phone calls. Jackson prepared for his fourth attempt. He'd been quiet since his earlier failures, the weight of his reputation sitting heavy on his shoulders. 2,000 meters in Helmand Province meant nothing here. Different conditions, different pressure, different outcome. He fired. Mississippi Martinez took his third position. Then Vega again. The count climbed. 25 attempts. 26. The sun continued its march toward evening. The wind held its pattern, and Maya continued watching, timing, calculating, knowing with absolute certainty that she could make the shot they couldn't. Green spoke quietly beside her. "You really think you can hit it?" "Yes, sir." "Why?" "Because I've watched this range every day for 6 months. I know it better than I know anything." "That's not qualification. That's observation. Sometimes observation matters more than qualification, sir." He considered this. "You should tell the general." She looked at the group of senior enlisted shooters, at their patches and their records, and their barely concealed contempt for the corporal with the clipboard. "Tell him what, sir? That I think I'm better than 12 decorated snipers? That you might have a capability they don't? Might isn't enough to overcome what I'd face if I'm wrong. And if you're right, then maybe I get a chance to prove everyone wrong about what a range safety officer can do." The general's voice cut through their conversation. "4 attempts remaining today. Tomorrow we bring in specialists from Pendleton. This will get resolved one way or another." Maya wrote down the time. The wind cycle continued, and somewhere downrange, a target waited for someone who could finally read the desert's rhythm well enough to make the impossible shot. Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb stepped onto the platform like he owned it. He'd arrived an hour ago, fresh from Quantico, where he served as a senior instructor at the Scout Sniper School. His record preceded him. Confirmed kills at distances that made the other shooters look like amateurs. 2,100 meters. 2,300. Numbers that should have made this shot routine. General Barrett greeted him with visible relief. "Webb, good to see you." "Sir." Webb surveyed the range, the waiting rifle, the group of failed shooters standing to the side. "I understand we're having difficulty with a 2670 shot. 29 attempts so far." The general's voice carried frustration he didn't bother hiding. Webb nodded. "Wind conditions?" "Variable, but predictable. Corporal Chun has documentation." The general gestured toward Maya. Webb glanced at her, his expression neutral. She'd seen that look before. Not dismissive like Roderick. Not hostile like Palmer. Just blank. The look that said she didn't register as relevant to the conversation. She handed him her clipboard. He flipped through the pages quickly, too quickly to actually read the data, then handed it back. "Appreciate the effort, Corporal. I'll take it from here." Maya stepped aside. Henderson leaned toward Roderick. "This guy's legit. If anyone can make it, Webb can." "Man's a legend," Roderick agreed. "Teaches the teachers." Webb took his position behind the rifle. The platform went silent. Even Palmer and Jackson, who'd bristled at every suggestion all day, watched with something approaching reverence. This was the shooter who would validate them, who would prove the shot was possible and explain why they'd failed. Maya checked her watch. The wind cycle had just reset. Webb had 35 seconds before the optimal window opened. She saw him settle in, saw his breathing pattern establish. He was good, technically perfect, but he wasn't watching the mirage. He fired at 20 seconds. Too early. The spotter called it. Mississippi. 3 meters left, 2 meters high. The silence on the platform changed quality. Henderson shifted his weight. Torres crossed his arms. Webb's miss hit different than theirs. He was supposed to be beyond this. Webb sat up from the rifle. "Conditions are challenging. I'll need a few minutes to recalibrate." "Take your time," the general said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier relief. Maya watched Webb review his calculations. He was running standard ballistic formulas, accounting for wind speed and direction, for the Earth's rotation at this latitude, for the temperature differential. All correct. All insufficient. The numbers alone wouldn't tell him what the desert was doing to his bullet's flight path. Green spoke quietly beside her. "You see what he did wrong? Fired too early. The mirage was still distorting. You should tell him." She looked at Green like he'd suggested she walk into traffic. Tell Staff Sergeant Webb, legendary sniper instructor, that he missed his timing window? Fair point. Green returned to his spotting scope. Webb took his second position. Maya timed him. He was watching his data, his formulas, his calculated corrections. But he wasn't watching the desert itself. The wind shifted. 20 seconds into the cycle, he fired again. Mississippi, 2 meters right, 1 meter low. Webb's jaw tightened. The other shooters looked at each other. If Webb couldn't hit it, what did that say about the shot itself? About the mission parameters? About what the general was asking them to do? Roderick found his voice first. Sir, if I may, maybe the issue isn't the shooters. Maybe it's the conditions. This range, this wind, this distance combination might be beyond practical engagement parameters. The general's expression hardened. The mission doesn't care about practical parameters, Staff Sergeant. The target will be at this range. The conditions will be similar. We either find someone who can make the shot, or we tell command the operation isn't feasible. Maya saw what that meant to him. Saw it in the way his shoulders set, in the controlled frustration in his voice. This wasn't about testing shooters. This was about mission success or failure. About lives that depended on someone hitting a target nobody seemed able to hit. Webb prepared for his third attempt. He took longer this time, double-checking everything. Maya watched the wind cycle restart. Watched the mirage shimmer and dance at 2670 meters. She could feel the rhythm of it now. Could sense when the window would open like some people could sense rain coming. Webb fired at 30 seconds. Better timing, but still not aligned with the mirage clear. Mississippi. 1 meter left, half meter high. Closer. The general leaned forward. That's progress. But it still wasn't a hit. Webb stood from the rifle, frustration evident now. He pulled out his rangefinder, his ballistic calculator, his weather meter. All the tools that should have given him the answer. Maya knew what he was missing. Not more data, more observation, more patience, more willingness to let the desert tell him when to shoot instead of telling the desert when he was ready. The general checked his phone again. Another message. Another timeline pressure. He looked at Webb. One more attempt, then we break for today. Webb nodded. He reset his position, going through his checklist with even more precision. Maya checked her watch. The cycle was building. 20 seconds. 30. The window was coming. She held her breath, willing him to wait to see what she saw. He fired at 35 seconds. Mississippi. The spotter's voice had gone flat. Half meter right, half meter low. The closest anyone had come. Close enough to prove the shot was theoretically possible. Far enough to prove that theory and execution were different things entirely. Webb packed his gear with controlled movements, the kind that said he was keeping his emotions in check through sheer discipline. The general addressed the platform. We resume tomorrow at 0600. I'm bringing in 2 more specialists from Pendleton. Someone will make this shot. The shooters dispersed. Maya began collecting her equipment, organizing the spent brass, completing her safety officer duties. Henderson passed her on the way out. Your notes were solid, Chun. Wind data was accurate. Thank you, sir. Didn't help, though. He shrugged. Guess sometimes accurate isn't enough. She watched him leave. The platform emptied until only she and Green remained. He was securing the spotting scope, moving with the careful efficiency of someone who'd done this job for years. Tomorrow's going to be more of the same, he said without looking at her. More shooters, more misses, unless something changes. What needs to change, sir? He finally looked at her directly. Someone needs to shoot who knows this range better than they know the manual. Someone who's been watching instead of just calculating. She held his gaze. That's not my position, sir. Maybe it should be. He picked up his gear and left her alone on the platform. Maya looked downrange. 2670 meters. The target unmarked despite 33 attempts. The wind continued its 40-second cycle. The mirage cleared for its 8-second window. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she could hit what they couldn't. The question was whether knowing mattered if nobody would let her try. Dawn came with 2 new shooters from Camp Pendleton, Gunnery Sergeant Cross and Staff Sergeant Liu. Both had reputations that preceded them. Cross had the Marine Corps long-range shooting record at 2,400 meters. Lou had won the last 3 inter-service precision rifle competitions. The shooters from yesterday watched them arrive with a mixture of hope and wounded pride. General Barrett wasted no time on preliminaries. Gentlemen, you've been briefed on the situation. We need a confirmed hit at 2670 meters. The clock is running. Cross studied the range through binoculars. Wind's already up. Consistent pattern, though, Maya said, then immediately regretted speaking. Cross turned to look at her. Who's this? Corporal Chun, range safety officer. She's been documenting conditions. The general handed Cross a summary of Maya's wind data. Cross read it, his expression skeptical. 40-second cycle. That's unusually consistent for desert conditions. It has been for 6 months, sir. Maya kept her voice neutral. 6 months. He looked at her more carefully now. You've been tracking this range for 6 months? Part of my duties, sir. Range safety doesn't usually include meteorological analysis. She felt Palmer's eyes on her. Felt Roderick's amusement. I like to be thorough, sir. Lou joined them, reviewing the data over Cross's shoulder. If this pattern holds, there's an 8-second optimal window. We time it right, this shot's makeable. 33 people have tried, Palmer said, including Webb yesterday. Nobody's made it yet. Then, 34's the charm. Lou moved to the rifle with confidence that made yesterday's attempts look tentative. Maya checked her watch. The morning wind was building differently than afternoon patterns. The cycle might shift. She opened her mouth to mention it, then closed it again. Lou was already settling into position, already running his calculations, already deciding he knew better than 6 months of observation. He fired. Mississippi. For meters right. The wind pushed it, Lou said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Cross took his turn. He waited longer, watching the wind flags downrange. Good instincts. But he was watching flags, not mirage. The flags showed wind direction. The mirage showed what the wind was actually doing to the bullet's path at distance. Mississippi. 3 meters left, 1 meter high. The general's phone buzzed continuously now. Maya could see the pressure building in his shoulders, in the way he checked his watch between every attempt. Somewhere, people were waiting on confirmation that this shot was possible, that the mission could proceed, that the target could be eliminated from 2670 meters when it mattered. Attempt 36. 37. Cross and Lou alternated, each miss adding weight to the morning air. The other shooters watched in silence. If these two couldn't hit it, if the best the Corps could field in 12 hours couldn't make this shot, what did that mean? Roderick leaned close to Henderson, starting to think Chin's wind data is cursed. Everyone who uses it still misses. Maybe the data's wrong, Henderson suggested. Maya heard them, but said nothing. The data wasn't wrong. The application was. They were treating her observations like a formula instead of a conversation with the environment. The desert didn't follow formulas. It followed patterns, rhythms, temperaments that changed hour by hour. Cross prepared for his 4th attempt. He'd studied every previous miss, adjusted his calculations, compensated for factors that other shooters had ignored. Maya watched him settle in, watched his breathing steady. He was technically perfect, fundamentally flawed. He fired at the wrong moment in the cycle. Mississippi. Lou tried again. Then Cross. The morning wore into late morning. Attempt 42. 43. The target remained pristine, untouched, mocking them with its distance. General Barrett's phone rang instead of buzzed. He stepped away to answer it, his voice sharp. Yes, sir. No, sir. Not yet. We're still working the problem. Maya knew that tone. That was a superior officer demanding answers the general didn't have. She looked at Green. He met her eyes and gave the smallest nod. Time was up. The general returned. His expression had gone from frustrated to grim. We have until 1500 hours. After that, Command is exploring alternative approaches to the mission. Alternative approaches meant the mission parameters would change. The target would be hit differently. More risk, more exposure, possibly more casualties. All because nobody could make one shot from 2670 meters. Palmer spoke up. Sir, with respect, maybe it's time to consider that this specific shot in these specific conditions isn't achievable with current personnel and equipment. Not achievable or not achieved. The general's voice cut. There's a difference, gunnery sergeant. Sir, 43 attempts by 15 different shooters. At some point we have to face reality. Reality is that somewhere downrange is a target that needs to be hit. Reality is that I have 6 hours to confirm capability or tell command we can't execute as planned. The platform went quiet. Cross and Lou exchanged glances. Webb, who'd returned this morning to observe, stared at the range like it had personally offended him. And Maya stood with her clipboard, her 6 months of data, her absolute certainty that she could hit what they couldn't. Green's voice broke the silence. Sir, permission to speak freely? Granted. We've been approaching this like a technical problem. Calculations, corrections, formulas. But Corporal Chin's been watching this range as an ecosystem. Maybe we need someone who knows the environment instead of just the mathematics. The general turned to Maya. You have something to add, Corporal? She felt every eye on the platform fix on her. Felt the weight of ranks and ribbons and reputations. Sir, the wind pattern I documented works, but only if you read the mirage timing. The 8-second window isn't calculated. It's observed. Lou frowned. We've been observing. Respectfully, sir, you've been calculating and then observing to confirm your calculations. That's backwards for this environment. Cross, step forward. You're saying you can read conditions we can't? I'm saying I've watched this range every day for 6 months. I know when the mirage clears. I know when the updraft from the valley stabilizes. I know the rhythm. Roderick laughed. Oh, this is rich. The safety officer thinks she's got mystical desert knowledge the rest of us lack. Not mystical, sir. Just experience with this specific location. Experience doesn't mean capability, Palmer said. You ever shot past 2,000 meters? No, sir. Then what makes you think you can succeed where 15 qualified snipers have failed? Maya looked at the general. Because I've been paying attention, sir. For 6 months. Every day. While everyone else was everywhere else, I was here. Watching. Learning. Understanding. The general studied her face. You're saying you want to attempt a shot. I'm saying I think I can make it, sir. The platform erupted. Palmer protesting about protocol. Roderick laughing about desperation. Lou questioning whether they'd really reached the point of letting a corporal with no sniper qualification attempt what trained specialists couldn't achieve. General Barrett held up his hand. Silence fell. He checked his watch. We have 5 hours and 40 minutes. Chun, if you miss, we've lost nothing we haven't already lost 43 times. You'll get one attempt. Sir, Palmer began. One attempt, the general repeated. After lunch. That gives her time to prepare, and you all time to accept that maybe rank and qualification aren't the only measures of capability. Maya's hands tightened on her clipboard. One shot, one chance. Everything she'd observed, everything she'd calculated, everything she knew about this range distilled into a single moment. She met the general's eyes. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, Corporal. Thank me after you hit. The platform cleared for lunch. Most of the shooters retreated to the shade of the equipment building, their voices carrying across the range in skeptical conversation. Maya remained behind, studying the rifle she'd soon be using. The same weapon that had failed 43 times. Same scope, same ammunition, different shooter. Green approached with 2 bottles of water. Figured you might be too nervous to remember hydration. She took one gratefully. Thank you, sir. You don't have to do this, you know. Nobody would blame you for backing out. Yes, they would. She took a long drink. They'd say I got cold feet, that I talked a big game but couldn't deliver, that a corporal has no business challenging staff sergeants and gunnery sergeants. He leaned against the railing. Fair point. So why risk it? Because I know I can make the shot, sir. And because if I don't try and the mission fails, I'll spend the rest of my career wondering if I could have made a difference. That's a heavy weight for a corporal. She smiled without humor. Being a woman in this job is already a heavy weight, sir. Might as well put it to use. Webb emerged from the equipment building and walked directly to the rifle. He began adjusting the scope, checking the mounting, testing the trigger pull. Maya watched him work with the meticulous care of a master craftsman examining someone else's tools. "Scope's set for my eye relief," he said without looking at her. "You'll need to adjust it." "Thank you, sir. Stock length might be wrong for you too." He made a notation on a pad. "And the trigger pull is set at 3.5 pounds. Some shooters prefer lighter." "This is fine, sir." He finally looked at her directly. "You really think you can make this shot?" "Yes, sir." "Based on what?" "Wind observation." "Based on 6 months of watching this range every single day. Based on understanding how the temperature gradient affects bullet trajectory at different times of day. Based on knowing that the Mirage doesn't just clear randomly. It clears in a specific 8-second window that repeats every 40 seconds. Webb considered this. "I've been teaching snipers for 9 years. I've shot in 12 different countries under conditions most people can't imagine. And I missed this target 4 times. I know, sir. So either you're delusional or you see something I don't. Maybe both, sir." He almost smiled. "For what it's worth, Corporal, I hope you hit it. This mission needs a solution, not my ego." She watched him walk away. The first person all morning who'd wished her success instead of failure. Green caught her eye and nodded toward Webb's retreating form. "Not everyone here wants you to miss. Just most of them, sir. Most of them are scared of what it means if you hit. Scared that they miss something obvious. Scared that rank doesn't equal capability." "What do you think it means, sir?" He shrugged. "I think it means we've been training snipers to trust their equipment more than their instincts. We've made it about calculations and technology instead of reading the environment. Maybe that works most places. But here, in this specific location, maybe it takes someone who actually knows the ground." The lunch hour passed. Shooters drifted back to the platform in small groups. Palmer and Roderick stood together, their body language speaking volumes. Torres and Henderson positioned themselves near the spotting scope. Cross and Liu maintained professional distance, observing but not engaging. And General Barrett stood at the center of it all, checking his watch with increasing frequency. 1400 hours, he announced. "Corporal Chun, you're up." Maya stood. Her hands were steady, her breathing calm. She'd visualized this moment 100 times in the past 6 months. Every time she'd watched shooters miss, she'd imagined what she would do differently. Now theory became reality. She approached the rifle. Webb's adjustments had left it close to what she needed. She made minor corrections to the stock length, shifted the scope slightly. Behind her, she heard Roderick's voice, low but audible. $20 says she doesn't even get it on paper." "I'll take that bet," Green said quietly. The challenge hung in the air. Maya blocked it out. Blocked out the voices, the doubts, the weight of 43 failures behind her. She settled into position, feeling the rifle settle against her shoulder like an old friend. Not because she'd shot this specific weapon before, but because she understood its purpose, its design, its capability. Palmer called out from behind her. "Chun, you need a spotter to call wind?" "I've got it, sir." "Your call." His tone suggested he thought she was making a mistake. Maya checked her watch. The wind cycle had just reset. She had time. She steadied her breathing, let her body settle into the position. Through the scope, the target appeared impossibly small. 2670 meters translated into a dot barely larger than the crosshairs at maximum magnification. She watched the Mirage, watched the heat waves dance and shimmer at distance. The pattern she'd studied for 6 months played out exactly as expected. 20 seconds into the cycle, the Mirage began to settle. 30 seconds. Almost there. She took a breath and held it. "You waiting for something specific?" Torres asked. "The right moment, sir." 35 seconds. The Mirage was clearing. Her finger found the trigger. 40 seconds. The window opened. 8 seconds of clarity stretched before her like a path through chaos. She saw the target, saw the trajectory, saw the bullet's flight in her mind before her finger moved. Then someone's phone rang. The sound shattered her concentration. She eased off the trigger, the moment lost. The Mirage began to shimmer again as the window closed. She sat up from the rifle. General Barrett was on the phone, his voice tight. "I understand, sir." "Yes, sir." 15 minutes. He ended the call and looked at Maya. "You have one more attempt. Command needs confirmation in 15 minutes or we're moving to alternative approach. 15 minutes. One more window. One more chance. Maya settled back into position. The pressure had just increased exponentially. Miss now, and she wasn't just failing herself. She was potentially changing the entire mission structure, changing tactical approaches, changing risk calculations for everyone involved. No pressure, though, Roderick muttered. Maya tuned him out, tuned everything out except the wind and the mirage and the target waiting 2670 meters downrange. She checked her watch. The cycle was building again. This time, nothing would break her focus. This time, she would wait for the window and take the shot that nobody else had made. The platform went silent. Even the doubters stopped talking, and Maya waited for the desert to tell her when. Maya's world narrowed to the scope. Everything else faded into background noise. The platform beneath her, the sun overhead, the voices behind her. All of it dissolved until only the target remained. 2670 meters of desert air stood between her and validation. She felt the rifle against her shoulder, felt the subtle pressure of the stock against her cheek, felt her heartbeat steady into the rhythm she'd trained for years to achieve. 70 beats per minute. 65. 60. Her body understood what her mind had decided. This was the moment. Through the scope, she watched the mirage. The heat signatures that bent light and distorted reality at extreme range. Most shooters fought the mirage, tried to calculate through it, attempted to compensate for its effects. Maya had learned something different during her 6 months of observation. The mirage wasn't an obstacle. It was a timer. 20 seconds into the cycle, the shimmering intensified. 30 seconds. The heat waves began to organize, to pattern themselves. She'd watched this transformation hundreds of times. Watched it from this exact position, this exact angle, this exact distance. She knew what came next. Behind her, someone shifted weight. The platform creaked. She barely heard it. General Barrett's voice cut through her concentration. 12 minutes, Chun. She didn't respond, didn't acknowledge. Her entire focus remained fixed on the mirage pattern developing at 2670 meters. 35 seconds. The shimmer began to settle. The heat waves organized into parallel lines like ripples on water, finding equilibrium. Almost there. Green spoke from the spotting scope position. Winds holding at 11 knots. Southwest. Maya already knew. She'd felt the wind on her face when she'd taken position. Had noted its consistency with the pattern she'd logged for weeks. The wind wasn't the variable. The mirage was. The mirage told her when all the factors aligned. When temperature and air density and humidity and a dozen other elements created that perfect 8-second window. 40 seconds. The window opened. The mirage cleared like a curtain pulling back. Suddenly, the target appeared with crystalline clarity. No shimmer, no distortion, just clean sight picture and pure trajectory calculation. Her finger found the trigger, found the precise point where 3.5 pounds of pressure would break the sear and release the firing pin. She exhaled half a breath, held a rest. Her heart beat once, twice. The crosshairs settled on the target center. Perfectly still despite the 2670 meters of distance. Despite the wind. Despite everything that should have made this shot impossible. She squeezed. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. The sound cracked across the desert, echoing off distant rocks and scattering birds from scrub brush. The muzzle blast kicked up dust that drifted slowly in the 11-knot wind. And then everything went still. Flight time at 2670 meters was approximately 3.8 seconds. Maya knew this from her calculations, had verified it against ballistic tables, had factored it into her mental preparation. But knowing the number and experiencing the weight were different things entirely. 1 second. The bullet crossed the first 500 meters, air resistance building, trajectory beginning its arc. 2 seconds. Past 1,500 meters. The bullet now subjected to wind drift, gravity, the Coriolis effect. All the factors that the other shooters had tried to calculate and failed to execute. 3 seconds. 2,200 meters. The round beginning its descent, following the trajectory Maya had visualized based on 6 months of observation and years of training. 3.8 seconds. Impact. Green's voice came from behind the spotting scope. Flat. Emotionless. Hit. The word hung in the air like the gun, smoke still drifting from the muzzle. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Maya stayed in position. I still pressed to the scope, watching the target through the mirage that had already begun to return. Hit. Green repeated, louder this time. Center mass. Perfect placement. The platform erupted. Not with celebration. With disbelief. Palmer grabbed the spotting scope, shouldering Green aside to verify. Torres pulled out binoculars. Cross was already on his phone, pulling up the target camera feed. Lou stood motionless, face blank with shock. That's impossible, Roderick said. His voice carried none of its earlier mockery, just stunned confusion. She made it first try. Maya sat up from the rifle. Her hands were steady, her breathing calm. She'd known she would hit, had visualized it so many times that the execution felt like memory rather than achievement. But knowing and doing were different enough that relief washed through her in a wave. General Barrett stepped forward. Confirm that hit. I want 3 independent verifications. Palmer spoke from the spotting scope. It's confirmed, sir. Dead center. His voice held no triumph, just flat acknowledgement of fact. Cross held up his phone. Target camera confirms. Impact point is within 2 inches of perfect center. Torres lowered his binoculars. Verified, sir. The general turned to Maya. She stood at attention, clipboard still tucked under her arm, like she hadn't just accomplished what 43 attempts by 15 shooters had failed to achieve. He studied her face, his expression unreadable. Then he extended his hand. Outstanding shooting, Corporal Chun. She shook it. Thank you, sir. Webb approached, moving slowly like a man, reassessing fundamental assumptions. He looked at the rifle, at Maya, at the target downrange. May I ask what you saw that I missed? The mirage window, sir. It opens for 8 seconds at the peak of the wind cycle. Everything has to happen inside that window. I waited for conditions to stabilize. They don't stabilize, sir. They cycle. The trick isn't waiting for perfect conditions. It's recognizing the moment when conditions align temporarily and taking the shot before they diverge again. Webb nodded slowly. 6 months of observation. Every single day, sir. Henderson found his voice. I'll be damned. She actually did it. Roderick stood frozen, still processing. His earlier confidence, his dismissive comments, his certainty that a corporal range safety officer couldn't possibly succeed where decorated snipers failed, all of it collapsing under the weight of observable reality. He looked at Maya like she'd performed magic instead of marksmanship. Palmer set down the spotting scope. Chun, I owe you an apology. I doubted your capability based on your rank and position. That was wrong. Accepted, sir. Maya kept her voice neutral. Professional. Not because she didn't feel vindicated, but because rubbing it in would cost her more than it gained. Lou stepped forward. That wind timing technique. You developed that through observation? Yes, sir. The pattern held consistent enough that I could predict it. We should document this. Include it in training protocols. This could change how we approach extreme range shooting in desert environments. Green spoke up from his position. I'd recommend Corporal Chun documents it herself, sir, seeing as she's the one who figured it out. The general checked his watch. I need to make a call. Chun, stay on the platform. The rest of you, give us the space. The shooters filed off slowly, some casting glances back at Maya, others lost in thought about what her success meant for their own failures. Webb lingered longest, studying the rifle setup one more time before finally departing with a respectful nod. Maya stood alone with the general and Green. The target downrange showed clear evidence of impact. 1 shot, 1 hit, after 43 misses. The weight of what she'd just accomplished began to settle on her shoulders. Not the shot itself, but everything it represented, everything it proved, everything it changed. General Barrett finished his call and turned to face her. Command is satisfied. Mission is approved to proceed. Because of you, Corporal, we now have confirmed capability at 2670 meters. Happy to help, sir. I suspect you're more than happy. You just proved something that needed proving. To me. To them. To yourself. She met his eyes. Yes, sir. I did. The question is what happens next. What we do with a corporal who just outshot 15 specialists. The equipment building became an impromptu briefing room. General Barrett had commandeered the space, cleared the tables, and assembled everyone who'd witnessed the shot. Maya stood near the door, still processing the shift from invisible safety officer to the center of attention. Cross broke the silence first. General, with your permission, I'd like to understand the methodology Corporal Chin used. For training purposes. Agreed, Lou added. That wind timing technique could have applications beyond this specific range. The general gestured to Maya. Chin, walk us through it. She moved to the whiteboard mounted on the wall. Someone handed her a marker. 15 shooters who'd spent the morning missing now watched her with expressions ranging from genuine curiosity to barely masked resentment. She took a breath and began. The key is understanding that desert conditions don't stabilize, they cycle. She drew a simple wave pattern on the board. Every 40 seconds, the wind pattern completes a full cycle. Temperature gradients shift. Air density fluctuates. The mirage responds to all of it. Webb leaned forward. We account for wind in our calculations. You account for wind speed and direction, sir. But at 2670 meters, the mirage effect is more significant than raw wind speed. The mirage tells you what the air is actually doing to your bullet's path. Palmer frowned. So you're saying we should ignore ballistic calculations? No, sir. I'm saying calculations get you close. Observation gets you on target. She drew another diagram showing the 8-second window. At the peak of each cycle, the mirage clears for approximately 8 seconds. During that window, you have maximum visibility and minimum atmospheric distortion. That's when you take the shot. Torres studied the diagram. How did you identify the pattern? 6 months of daily observation, sir. A log wind speed, temperature, humidity, time of day, and mirage behavior. The pattern emerged after about 3 weeks. The rest was verification. Henderson spoke up. So anyone who spends 6 months watching this range could replicate your results? Theoretically, yes, sir, but it requires consistent observation. Most people rotate through here too quickly to develop that environmental familiarity. Roderick had been silent since the shot. Now he found his voice. Why didn't you mention this technique earlier? Before we wasted 43 attempts? Maya met his eyes. With respect, sir, would you have listened? If a corporal range safety officer had suggested she knew something 15 qualified snipers didn't, what would your response have been? The room went quiet. Everyone knew the answer. Roderick looked away first. General Barrett stepped forward. Chin makes a valid point. We have a culture problem. We prioritize rank and credential over capability and observation. That needs to change. Lou nodded. Agreed, sir. But the immediate question is mission execution. We now have confirmed capability at 2670 meters. We need to determine who takes the operational shot. Maya felt the shift in the room. The question hung heavy because everyone knew there were really only 2 options. Send one of the 15 shooters who'd failed, hoping they could replicate Maya's technique. Or send Maya herself. Cross voiced what others were thinking. General, Corporal Chun has the capability, but she lacks the operational experience. Sniper missions involve more than just making the shot. There's infiltration, target identification, extraction under potential contact. Valid concerns, the general agreed. Chin, what's your operational experience? 2 deployments, sir. Iraq and Afghanistan. Combat action in both. I've conducted Overwatch operations and participated in direct action missions. Never as primary sniper, but I've operated in similar environments. Palmer's expression remained skeptical. Overwatch isn't the same as being the shooter on a critical mission. The pressure's different. The stakes are different. I understand that, sir. But I also understand that making the shot is the primary mission requirement. Everything else is secondary to hitting the target. Webb stood from his chair. I have a proposal. I accompany Corporal Chun as spotter and tactical lead. She takes the shot. I handle everything else. Between us, we have the capability mix needed. The general considered this. Cross, your assessment? Cross took a long moment before responding. It's unorthodox, but given the mission timeline and the demonstration we just witnessed, it may be our best option. Chun has proven capability at the required range. Webb brings operational expertise. It's a viable team composition. Liu added his opinion. I concur. The shot is the critical element. We've confirmed Chun can make it. Build the team around that capability. Maya watched the discussion unfold. They were planning a real operation. An actual mission where the target wouldn't be a stationary mark on a safe range, but a real person at 2670 meters under combat conditions. The weight of it settled differently than the test shot had. General Barrett turned to her directly. Chun, I need you to understand what you're volunteering for. This isn't a demonstration. This isn't proving a point. This is a kill shot on a high-value target in a hostile environment. If you miss, people die. If you're compromised, people die. The margin for error is 0. I understand, sir. Do you? He stepped closer, his voice lower. Because I need to know if you can make that shot under pressure, with lives depending on it, when the target is a human being instead of paper. She held his gaze. Sir, I've been making decisions under pressure since I joined. Every range safety call I make affects lives. Every protocol I enforce matters. I know the difference between practice and real world. And I know I can make this shot when it counts. Webb spoke up. General, I'll vouch for her capability. Not just the marksmanship, but the mindset. She stayed calm under 43 failures and a platform full of doubters. That's the kind of mental discipline we need. The general looked around the room. Final objections? Palmer raised his hand. Not objection, sir, but a request. If Chin's going operational, I want to be part of the security element. She proved me wrong today. I like to help prove her right when it matters. Torres stepped forward. Same here, sir. Henderson nodded agreement. Count me in. Maya felt something shift in her chest. These men who'd doubted her, who'd dismissed her, who'd watched her with skepticism and barely concealed contempt, now volunteered to put their lives alongside hers. Not because they liked her, not because they'd suddenly decided she was one of them, but because she'd earned something more valuable than acceptance. She'd earned respect. Roderick was the last to speak. He looked uncomfortable, his earlier confidence completely eroded. Chun, I was wrong about you. Completely wrong. If you'll have me, I'd like to be part of the team too. She nodded once. Appreciated, Staff Sergeant. General Barrett checked his watch. We brief in 2 hours. Mission launch is 0300 tomorrow. Chun, Webb, your primary team. Palmer, Torres, Henderson, Roderick, your security element. Cross and Liu, you're here as advisors and backup. Any questions? Maya had a dozen questions. About the target, about the location, about the rules of engagement. But the question that mattered most was the one she'd already answered. Could she make the shot when it counted? She'd proven she could hit paper at 2670 meters. Tomorrow she'd prove she could do more than that. The room cleared slowly. Shooters filing out to prepare, to brief their own teams, to process the rapid evolution from test to mission. Webb lingered, studying Maya with a careful assessment of a man whose life would soon depend on her capability. Tomorrow's different, he said quietly. I know. Paper doesn't shoot back. I know that too. He nodded. Good. Just making sure we're clear. Maya watched him leave. The equipment building emptied until only she and Green remained. He'd stayed silent during the entire briefing, observing from the back corner like a ghost at a funeral. You knew I could make it, she said. I suspected. But suspecting and knowing are different things. What's different about tomorrow? Everything. And nothing. You'll still be reading the wind. Still waiting for the mirage window. Still taking the same shot. But the target will have a face. A name. A family somewhere who doesn't know they're about to lose someone. Does that change the mission? No. But it changes you. Every time. He moved toward the door, then paused. The shot you made today proved you can hit the target. Tomorrow's shot will prove who you are as a Marine. She didn't ask what he meant. She already knew. Today, she'd proven capability. Tomorrow, she'd prove character. And the difference between those two things would define everything that came after. The briefing room held a different energy at 2100 hours. Gone was the skepticism from that morning. replaced by the focused tension of Marines preparing for live combat operations. Maya sat in the front row, notebook open, absorbing details that would mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. General Barrett stood before a topographical map of the target area. The high-value target will be at this compound at approximately 0700 local time. Intelligence indicates he maintains a predictable morning routine. Exits the main structure, walks to the eastern courtyard, spends 15 minutes conducting communications. Webb studied the map. Distance from primary hide site to courtyard, 2,670 meters. Confirmed via satellite imagery and ground reconnaissance. Maya noticed the exact number. The same distance she'd practiced. The same range where she'd made the shot. Not coincidence. Purpose. They designed the test specifically to match operational requirements. Palmer asked about security elements. Enemy force composition. Estimated 20 to 30 combatants on site. Mixed small arms. 2 technical vehicles with mounted weapons. Rooftop observation posts. The compound is hardened against direct assault, which is why we're utilizing long-range precision fire. Torres leaned forward. Exfil route? Webb took over the briefing. Primary extraction point is here, 3 kilometers north of the hide site. Secondary extraction point here, if primary, is compromised. We have air support on standby, but prefer ground movement to maintain operational security. Maya traced the route with her eyes. 3 kilometers through hostile territory after the shot. Not impossible, but not simple either. She'd trained for movement under pressure, but always as part of a larger element. Tomorrow she'd be the reason everyone had to move. Roderick raised his hand. Rules of engagement? The target is authorized for lethal force. Positive identification is required before engagement. Webb pointed to a photograph on the screen. This is Hassan Merchant, former militia commander, current weapons facilitator. Confirmed involvement in attacks against coalition forces. Your shot, Chun, eliminates a significant threat. Maya studied the photograph. Middle-aged man, beard, traditional dress. In the image, he was smiling, talking to someone outside the frame. In 15 hours, he'd be dead. She pushed away the thought and focused on the tactical elements. Henderson spoke up. Weather forecast? Cross pulled up meteorological data. Clear skies. Temperature at 0700 will be approximately 32 degrees Celsius and climbing. Wind from the southwest at 10 to 15 knots. Conditions similar to what we experience today. Similar, but not identical, Maya noted. Morning wind patterns differ from afternoon. The cycle timing might shift. Lou nodded, which is why you'll have time to observe before the shot window. Target routine gives us approximately 15 minutes of opportunity. Use the first 5 to read conditions. General Barrett addressed the room. This mission has strategic importance beyond the immediate target elimination. Success demonstrates our capability to conduct precision operations at extreme range in denied territory. Failure puts future operations at risk and potentially compromises intelligence sources. No pressure, though, Roderick muttered, then caught himself. Sorry, sir. The general's expression didn't change. Pressure is appropriate. This is what we train for. Chun questions? Maya reviewed her notes. Hide site construction timeline? Webb answered. We infill at 0300. 4 hours to reach the site and establish position. That gives you 90 minutes before the target window to observe conditions and confirm your setup. Backup shooter? You're primary. I'm backup if you're incapacitated. But the mission is built around your capability. The weight of that statement settled across her shoulders. They'd restructured an entire operation around her ability to make one shot. 15 other shooters were available. Any of them could serve as backup. But she was the primary because she'd proven she could hit what they couldn't. Torres asked about communications protocols. Webb walked through the radio procedures, authentication codes, emergency signals. Palmer covered security element positioning. Henderson detailed extraction contingencies. The briefing continued for another hour, each detail adding layers to the operational picture. At 2200 hours, General Barrett dismissed everyone except the primary team. Webb, Chun, Palmer, Torres, Henderson, Roderick. 6 Marines who would insert into hostile territory in 5 hours. The general's expression shifted from commander to something more personal. I want to be clear about what I'm asking you to do. This isn't a combat patrol with mutual support. This isn't a raid with overwhelming force. This is a small team conducting a high-risk operation in enemy territory based on intelligence that could be wrong. If that target doesn't appear tomorrow morning, you'll have to exfil under potential observation with nothing to show for the risk. Palmer nodded. Understood, sir. If he does appear and Chun misses, you'll be compromised and surrounded. Extraction under fire from a defended compound. Casualties are likely. We know the risks, sir. Webb's voice was calm. Good. The general turned specifically to Maya. Chun, I need you to understand something. When you made that shot today, you proved you could hit a target. Tomorrow you're proving you can kill a human being. Those are different things. If you have doubts, now is the time to voice them. Maya met his eyes. No doubts, sir. I understand the mission. I understand the stakes. And I understand that this isn't about proving myself anymore. This is about eliminating a threat that's killed our people. The general studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Good. Get some rest. All of you. Transport departs at 00:30. The team filed out into the night air. The base was quiet, most personnel already asleep. Tomorrow would bring another day of training, routine operations, the normal rhythm of military life. 4-6 Marines, tomorrow would bring something else entirely. Webb walked beside Maya toward the barracks. You should try to sleep. Should I? She looked at the stars overhead. Because I'm thinking sleep might be difficult tonight. Always is before the first one. He spoke with the certainty of experience. The first shot at a human target. Your mind goes places it doesn't go before paper targets. Does it get easier? No, it gets different. You stop questioning whether you can do it, but you never stop feeling it. They reached the barracks entrance. Maya turned to face him. Staff Sergeant, why did you volunteer to spot for me? You could have pushed for a primary shooter position. Your credentials justify it. Webb smiled slightly. Because you made the shot I couldn't. That tells me something about your capability. And because I've spent 9 years teaching snipers that it's about the mission, not the ego. Tomorrow I get to prove I believe that. He left her standing alone in the darkness. Above, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. Constant. Predictable. Unlike the wind she'd spend tomorrow reading. Unlike the target she'd spend tomorrow tracking. Unlike the moment when her finger would squeeze the trigger and change someone's life by ending it. Maya entered the barracks. Her bunk waited. Her gear was staged. Her weapon was cleaned and verified. Everything was ready except the question Webb had raised. Not could she make the shot, but who would she be after making it? The difference between hitting paper and hitting flesh. Between proving capability and accepting consequence. She lay down without changing clothes, closed her eyes, and spent the next 4 hours not sleeping but preparing. Not for the shot itself, that part she knew she could make, but for everything that came after. The weight that would settle, the knowledge that would remain, the price of proving she belonged among the shooters who doubted her. Tomorrow she'd make the shot. Tonight, she became the person who could live with making it. The hide site sat carved into a hillside overlooking the compound. Natural rock formation provided cover. Camouflage netting broke up their silhouette against the dawn sky. Maya had been in position for 90 minutes, watching the target area through her scope as morning light gradually revealed details invisible in darkness. Webb lay beside her. I pressed to the spotting scope. Behind them, Palmer, Torres, Henderson, and Roderick maintained security positions. Radio discipline held. Nobody spoke unless necessary. The only sounds were wind across rock and the distant calls of birds greeting sunrise. Maya checked her watch. 06:30. 30 minutes until the target's expected appearance. She'd spent the last hour reading conditions. Wind patterns here differed slightly from the practice range. The cycle ran closer to 45 seconds instead of 40. The mirage behavior showed variations she'd need to account for. But the fundamental pattern remained. Watch. Wait. Recognize the window. Execute. Webb's voice came low. Compound activity. Eastern door. Maya shifted her scope. A figure emerged. Male. Wrong build. Too young. Security element conducting morning patrol. She tracked him across the courtyard, noting his movement pattern, his weapon carry, his level of alertness. The compound was waking up. Additional movement. Southern building. 3 more figures. Morning routine establishing. Maya's breathing stayed steady. Her heart rate remained controlled. All the pre-mission nerves had burned off during the 4-hour infill. Now she existed in that focused state where training took over and doubt disappeared. The light improved. Shadows shortened. Maya could see individual features now at 2670 meters. The scope's magnification brought the compound close enough to count windows, identify weapon types, recognize faces. Still no sign of the primary target. 0645, Webb whispered. 15 minutes. Maya watched the eastern door. Intelligence said Hassan would emerge between 0650 and 07. Predictable routine maintained for 3 weeks. But intelligence was prediction, not guarantee. He might not appear. Might change his pattern. Might already be dead from some other cause. Behind them, Palmer's radio clicked twice. Security check. All clear. The team maintained discipline. No unnecessary communication. No movement that might compromise position. They trained for this. Practiced until it became instinct. Maya studied the wind. The 40 fivesecond cycle held consistent. She timed 12 complete rotations. The 8-second window appeared at the peak, just like at the practice range. Different timing, but same principle. She could make the shot. The question was whether the target would give her the opportunity. 0650, movement at the eastern door. Maya's finger moved to the trigger guard. Not on the trigger yet. Not until she had positive identification. But ready to transition the moment confirmation came. Male. Correct age. Correct build. Webb's voice held tension now. Stand by for positive ID. The figure stepped into better light. Maya studied his face through the scope. Compared it to the photograph she'd memorized. Beard length matched. Facial structure aligned. Distinctive scar above left eye confirmed. This was Hassan Merchant. This was the target. Positive ID confirmed, Webb said. You're cleared hot. Maya's finger moved to the trigger. 3.5 pounds of pressure away from mission completion. From eliminating a threat. From proving that a corporal range safety officer could execute what 15 other shooters couldn't. But she didn't fire. Not yet. The window hadn't opened. Target moving to courtyard center, Webb observed. Range 2670 meters confirmed. Wind 11 knots southwest. Maya already knew. She was reading the mirage, watching for the cycle peak. Hassan walked slowly, talking on a satellite phone. Animated conversation. He gestured with his free hand. Completely unaware that 2670 meters away, a Marine corporal was timing her shot to coincide with atmospheric conditions most shooters never learn to read. 30 seconds into the cycle, the mirage began its shift. Hassan stopped walking, stood in the center of the courtyard. Perfect position, perfect exposure. Maya's breathing steadied. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow, controlled, letting her heart rate drop into the zone where marksmanship lived. 40 seconds. The window approached. She could feel it coming like a surfer feeling the wave build. The mirage began to clear. Heat signatures organizing into parallel lines. Distortion fading. Clarity emerging. 45 seconds. The window opened. Through the scope, Hassan appeared with crystalline precision. Every detail sharp. Every feature clear. The satellite phone pressed to his ear. The morning sun illuminating his face. The slight smile as he spoke to whoever was on the other end of that call. 2670 meters away, but suddenly, impossibly close. Maya exhaled half a breath. Held a rest. Her finger increased pressure on the trigger. 1 pound. 2 pounds. The crosshairs settled on Hassan's center mass. Perfectly steady despite the distance, despite the wind, despite the knowledge that this wasn't paper anymore. 3 pounds. Almost there. Hassan laughed at something. The sound didn't carry across 2670 meters, but Maya saw it in his expression. Saw the humanity she was about to erase. saw the life that existed for 3 more seconds until her finger completed its travel. 3.5 pounds. The trigger broke. The rifle bucked. The sound cracked across the valley. Hassan continued laughing for the briefest instant, unaware. Then the bullet completed its 3.8-second flight. Impact Cinemass. Webb's voice stayed clinical. Target down. Confirm kill. Through the scope, Maya watched Hassan collapse. The satellite phone fell from his hand. His body crumpled with the sudden disconnection of life. Around him, security forces reacted with confusion, looking toward the sound, trying to identify the threat, not understanding yet that death had come from 2670 meters away. Confirmed kill, Webb repeated. Break position. Execute exfil. The team moved with practiced efficiency. Camouflage netting collapsed. Equipment secured. Position cleared. Palmer took point. Torres and Henderson on flanks. Roderick on rear security. Webb and Maya in the center, protected by the security element that had doubted her yesterday and now staked their lives on her capability. They moved down the hillside, away from the compound, toward the extraction point 3 kilometers north. Behind them, the compound descended into chaos, shooting at shadows, searching for threats, finding nothing but a dead commander and the impossible reality of a kill shot from extreme range. Maya's legs functioned on autopilot, moving over rocks, through scrub brush, maintaining pace with the team. But her mind remained at the compound, replaying the moment. The crosshairs settling, the trigger breaking. Hassan's expression in that last instant before the bullet arrived. The way he'd been laughing, had been human, had been alive. Chun, Webb's voice cut through her thoughts. Stay focused. We're not clear yet. She snapped back to the present, to the mission that wasn't over until they reached extraction, to the team depending on her to function as a Marine, not as someone processing what she'd just done. There would be time later for reflection, for processing, for understanding what it meant to take a life from 2670 meters away. Right now, she had 3 kilometers to cover, a team to keep pace with, an extraction point to reach. She made the shot, proven the capability, completed the mission. The rest could wait. They moved through the desert as the sun climbed higher. Behind them, Hassan Merchant lay dead in a courtyard. Ahead, extraction and the questions that would follow. But here, in this moment, Maya Chun was exactly what she'd proven herself to be. Not a ranged safety officer, not a doubted corporal, a Marine who made the shot when it mattered. The extraction helicopter touched down at On and 15, rotors churning dust into swirling clouds as the team climbed aboard. Maya collapsed into the canvas seat, weapon across her lap, adrenaline finally beginning to fade. 3 kilometers covered in 90 minutes. No contact, no pursuit, clean exfil. Webb settled beside her, removing his helmet. Good work back there. She nodded but didn't speak. Couldn't speak yet. The shot kept replaying in her mind. The clarity of the window, the pressure of the trigger, the sight of impact. She'd trained for this moment for years, prepared mentally for the difference between paper and flesh. But preparation and experience were different animals entirely. Palmer leaned across the helicopter's interior. Chin, seriously, that was textbook. Perfect execution. Henderson agreed. 2670 meters under operational conditions. Most snipers never make a shot like that in their entire career. Torres caught her eye. You earned your place today. Nobody's questioning that now. The helicopter banked east toward base. Through the open door, Maya watched the compound recede into the distance. Tiny figures still moved around the courtyard where Hassan had fallen. Recovery teams. Investigation. The aftermath of a death delivered from impossible range by someone they'd never seen coming. Roderick spoke up, his voice different than it had been yesterday. Chun, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you respect. You did what I couldn't, what none of us could. That takes more than skill. It takes something else entirely. She finally found her voice. It takes observation, patience, understanding the environment instead of fighting it. Still, he shook his head. You made it look easy. It wasn't easy. No, it wasn't. The flight continued in relative silence. each Marine processing the mission in their own way. Palmer reviewing security procedures. Torres checking equipment. Henderson making notes for the after-action report. And Maya sitting with the weight of what she'd done settling into her bones. The helicopter set down at 29 palms at on and a 45. General Barrett waited on the tarmac, along with Cross, Lou, and a handful of other personnel. The team disembarked, weapons secured, gear staged, the immediate tactical phase complete. Now came the administrative phase. Debriefs, reports, analysis. General Barrett approached Maya directly. Confirmed kill. Mission success. Outstanding work, Corporal. Thank you, sir. He studied her face. You good? She considered lying. Saying yes, maintaining the professional facade. But something in his expression suggested he'd see through it. I will be, sir. Good answer. He turned to address the full team. Debrief in 30 minutes. Get cleaned up. Get water. Get your heads right. The team dispersed. Maya headed toward the barracks, weapon slung, body moving on autopilot. She'd gone 26 hours without real sleep. 4 hours of infiltration. 6 hours holding position. 90 minutes of exfil. Her body wanted rest. Her mind wanted something else. Wanted to process. To understand. To reconcile the person who'd made that shot with the person she'd been yesterday. Green intercepted her outside the barracks. He held 2 bottles of water and the knowing expression of someone who'd been exactly where she was now. You made the shot. I made the shot. How do you feel? She took the water. Truthfully, I feel like I proved I could do something everyone said I couldn't. And I feel like I killed someone. Both things are true simultaneously, and I'm not sure how to reconcile them. You don't reconcile them. You carry them. Both of them. The capability and the consequence. That's what separates snipers from everyone else. Does it get easier? You're the third person who's asked me that in 12 hours. Green took a long drink from his water. The answer's still no. It gets different. You develop perspective, context, understanding that the target was a threat, that your actions saved lives even as it took one. But it never gets easy. Good. She met his eyes. I don't think it should be easy. Then you're going to be fine, Chun. Because the ones who find it easy are the ones we worry about. The debrief started at 10:15 in the same briefing room where they'd planned the mission 13 hours earlier. General Barrett led the session with Cross and Lou observing. The team walked through every phase. Infiltration timeline, hide site construction, security procedures. The shot itself. When they reached that moment, all eyes turned to Maya. She stood at the front of the room, marker in hand, recreating her observations on the whiteboard. Wind cycle held at 45 seconds instead of the 40 we practiced at. Mirage window still appeared at cycle peak, but lasted only 6 seconds instead of 8. Tighter window meant less margin for error. Webb added technical details. Target acquisition at 06:52. Positive ID confirmed at 06:53. Shot taken at 06:57. Flight time 3.8 seconds. Impact confirmed at 0700 point. Cross leaned forward. Chun, walk us through your decision process. How did you know when to take the shot? I watched for the Mirage clear. When the window opened and the target was properly positioned, I executed. Same technique as the practice shot, but adapted for different cycle timing. You adapted on site? Lou made notes. That's significant. Shows the technique isn't range-specific, but principle-based. That's the point, sir. Once you understand how to read the Mirage pattern, you can apply it to different environments. The timing changes, but the principle remains constant. Palmer spoke up. General, I'd like to formally recommend Corporal Chun for sniper school. She's demonstrated capability beyond what most qualified snipers achieve. She deserves the credential to match the skill. Agreed. Torres nodded. Her technique should be documented and integrated into training protocols. Henderson added his voice, and she should be the one teaching it. Nobody understands this methodology better. General Barrett listened to each recommendation, then turned to Maya. Chin, what do you want? Sniper school? Instructor position? Transfer to a specialized unit? She hadn't expected the question, hadn't thought beyond making the shot and proving capability. Now, she had to consider what came after proving, what she actually wanted instead of what she'd been fighting to achieve. Honestly, sir, I want to continue developing this technique. I want to understand how it applies to different environments, different ranges, different conditions. And I want to train other shooters to read terrain the way I've learned to read it. That sounds like instructor track. Maybe, sir, but not traditional instruction. Something new. Something that prioritizes observation over calculation. Environmental reading over equipment reliance. Lou exchanged glances with Cross. That's ambitious and valuable. We could use that capability at the schoolhouse. The general considered this. Here's what I'm prepared to offer. Immediate promotion to sergeant. Assignment to Scout Sniper School as special instructor focused on extreme range environmental observation techniques. You'll develop curriculum, train instructors, and deploy as needed for operational missions requiring your specific capability. Maya felt the weight of the offer. Everything she'd wanted. Everything she'd proven she deserved. The credential, the position, the respect. All of it suddenly available because she'd made one shot at 2670 meters when 15 other shooters couldn't. I accept, sir. Good. Report to Quantico in 30 days. Use that time to document your methodology. Write it down so others can learn it. Turn your 6 months of observation into something the entire Marine Corps can benefit from. The debrief concluded at 11:30. The team filed out exhausted but satisfied. Mission complete. Target eliminated. Everyone home safe. By Marine standards, a perfect operation. Maya remained behind as the room emptied. Sat in a chair and stared at the whiteboard covered in diagrams and notes. The technical breakdown of a kill shot. The mechanical description of taking a human life. All the details that mattered tactically but missed the deeper truth. Webb appeared in the doorway. You coming? In a minute. He entered and sat beside her. First kill is different. You're processing something everyone processes. The weight of it. The reality that you ended someone's story. Does that feeling ever go away? No, but it integrates. Becomes part of who you are instead of something foreign you're carrying. You'll be different after this. But different doesn't mean broken. She looked at him. How are you different? More careful, more deliberate, more aware that every action has consequence beyond the immediate tactical objective. He stood to leave. Get some rest, Chun. You earned it. She sat alone in the briefing room for another 20 minutes. Processing, integrating, understanding that she'd proven capability at a cost. The target eliminated. The mission successful. The respect earned. And somewhere in a compound 2670 meters away, people mourned someone she'd killed. Both truths existed simultaneously. The tactical success and the human cost. The capability demonstrated and the life taken. She'd carry both. Learn to integrate both. Become someone who could execute the mission while understanding its weight. Maya stood and left the briefing room. Outside, the California sun blazed overhead. Another day at 29 Palms. Another day of training and preparation. Except now she was different. Now she was the Marine who'd made the shot nobody else could make. And that would define everything that came after. 3 weeks later, Maya stood on the same observation platform where she'd watched 43 shooters fail. Except now she wore sergeant stripes and held instructor credentials. And instead of a clipboard, she carried a laser pointer and a comprehensive training manual she'd spent 21 days writing. 12 new students stood behind her. All staff sergeants and gunnery sergeants. All with sniper qualifications and combat experience. All watching her with the same mixture of skepticism and curiosity that the previous group had shown. The difference was they knew what had happened here. Knew about the corporal who'd made the impossible shot. Knew they were learning from someone who'd proven capability under pressure. General Barrett introduced her to the group. Sergeant Chun pioneered a methodology that changed how we approach extreme-range precision fire. Over the next 2 weeks, she'll teach you to read environmental conditions the way she's learned to read them. Pay attention. What she knows saved lives on a recent operation and will save more in the future. He left her with the group. Maya faced 12 sets of eyes and recognized the silent questions. Can she really teach this? Is it replicable? Will it work for us the way it worked for her? She'd wonder the same things while writing the manual. Whether 6 months of personal observation could be translated into 2 weeks of instruction. Whether the intuition she'd developed could be systematically taught. Whether the shot she'd made was unique capability or transferable skill. Only one way to find out. Let me start by telling you what this course isn't. It isn't about making you into better calculators. It isn't about new equipment or advanced ballistic software. It's about teaching you to observe, to read, to understand the environment you're shooting through instead of just shooting across it. One of the students, a gunnery sergeant with more ribbons than Maya had deployments, raised his hand. Sergeant Shun, with respect, we already observe conditions. Wind flags, mirage, atmospheric pressure. That's standard training. You observe to confirm calculations. I'm teaching you to observe to inform execution. There's a difference. She pulled up satellite imagery of the practice range. 2670 meters. 15 qualified snipers attempted this shot over 2 days. All missed. Why? Another student offered an answer. Conditions were challenging. Wind variability. Extreme range. Conditions were predictable. You just weren't watching for the pattern. Maya advanced to the next slide, showing her wind cycle data. Every environment has a rhythm. Desert wind doesn't shift randomly. It cycles based on temperature gradients, terrain features, time of day. Learn the cycle, and you know when conditions align. She spent the next hour walking them through the methodology. How to identify cycle duration. How to recognize the mirage clear window. How to time execution to coincide with optimal atmospheric conditions. The students took notes, asked questions, slowly shifted from skepticism to genuine interest. By afternoon, they were on the range. Maya had each student spend 30 minutes just observing. No shooting, no calculations, just watching the mirage, timing the wind, identifying patterns. Some caught on quickly. Others struggled to see what she saw. But all of them tried. Staff Sergeant Martinez approached during a break. This is different than anything I learned at sniper school. Because sniper school teaches you to overcome environmental challenges. I'm teaching you to work with them instead of against them. Does it work at other ranges? Other environments? I've adapted it to 3 different locations in the past 3 weeks. The principle holds. The specific timing changes, but once you learn how to read one environment, you can read others. He nodded slowly. And you figured this out by yourself? 6 months of observation with no formal guidance? Nobody else was watching. So I watched. Turned out that mattered more than I expected. By the end of week 1, 5 students had successfully hit the 2670-meter target. By the end of week 2, all 12 had confirmed hits. Not first-try perfection like Maya had achieved, but consistent capability developed through systematic observation and practice. General Barrett attended the final day of training, watched each student execute successful shots, reviewed Maya's training manual and curriculum structure, then pulled her aside for a private conversation. You've done something significant here, Sergeant. Turned personal capability into transferable skill. That's rare. Thank you, sir. Quantico wants you next month. They're establishing a new program focused on advanced environmental observation techniques. You'll be primary instructor. Maya looked out at the range where she'd spent 6 months watching what everyone else ignored, where she'd proven capability that changed her career trajectory, where she'd learned that sometimes the most valuable skill wasn't shooting, but seeing. I'm ready, sir. One more thing. He handed her a folder. Your operational file has been updated. Last month's mission eliminated a high-value target that intelligence indicates prevented 3 planned attacks. Estimated 30 to 40 coalition lives saved because you made that shot. She opened the folder. Read the intelligence assessment. Saw the tactical impact measured in lives preserved rather than life taken. Both things remained true. She'd killed Hassan Merchant, and that action had saved others. The weight and the worth existing simultaneously. Does that make it easier? She asked. No, but it provides context. Understanding why the mission mattered doesn't erase what it cost, but it helps explain why the cost was necessary. Maya closed the folder. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a corporal range safety officer nobody took seriously. Now, she was a sergeant instructor developing curriculum for the entire Marine Corps. The transformation felt surreal except for one constant. She was still the person who watched when others looked away, who saw patterns others missed, who understood that sometimes the answer wasn't in the calculations but in the environment itself. Before you head to any new viewer watching this, I want to ask something. Have you ever been underestimated? Ever had someone doubt your capability based on rank, position, or appearance? Drop a comment about that moment and what you did to prove them wrong. I'm curious how many of you have faced similar situations and found your own way through. The training class concluded. Students packed their gear. Several approached Maya to shake hands, to thank her for instruction that changed how they understood their craft. Martinez lingered longest. Sergeant Shun, I've been a sniper for 6 years. Thought I understood the job. You showed me I was missing something fundamental. Appreciate that. Just passing on what I learned watching this range, Staff Sergeant. Still, take someone special to see what everyone else missed. He left her standing on the platform. Below, the range stretched toward the target at 2670 meters. The same distance, the same wind, the same mirage patterns she'd studied for 6 months. But everything was different now. Webb appeared beside her. I heard Quantico's getting a new instructor. News travels fast. Good news travels fastest. He looked at the range with the same assessing gaze she'd learned to use. You changed something here, Chun. Change how we think about extreme range shooting. Changed how we develop snipers. That's legacy work. I just observed what was already there. That's what makes it significant. The desert was always telling us the answer. You were the first one who learned to listen. They stood in silence, watching the wind move across the valley, watching the mirage shimmer and clear in its eternal cycle, watching the environment that held answers for anyone patient enough to observe. Maya thought about the journey from doubted corporal to respected instructor, about the shot that changed everything, about Hassan Merchant and the weight that would never fully leave, about the students who'd learn from her experience and make their own impossible shots. All of it connected. The observation, the capability, the mission, the cost, the growth. Each piece necessary. Each piece building on what came before. She'd proven she belonged among shooters who'd initially dismissed her. Proven that rank and credential mattered less than capability and observation. Proven that sometimes the quietest person in the room saw clearest. General Barrett's voice carried across the platform. Sergeant Shun, transport's waiting. Quantico won't get any closer while you stand here reflecting. She smiled. Coming, sir. One last look at the range. At the target that had defeated 15 shooters before yielding to her. At the platform where she'd spent 6 months watching what everyone else ignored. At the place where she'd transformed from invisible to essential. Then she picked up her gear and walked toward whatever came next. Toward new students who'd learned from her experience. Toward new ranges where she'd develop new observations. Toward a career built on the foundation of one perfect shot and 6 months of patient watching. Behind her, the wind continued its cycle. The mirage cleared and returned. And somewhere, another young Marine was learning that the most valuable capability wasn't always the most obvious. That observation mattered as much as execution. That sometimes proving everyone wrong started with being willing to watch what everyone else missed. Maya stepped off the platform and didn't look back. The range would still be there. The lessons would still apply. And the shot she'd made would continue echoing through Marine Corps sniper training for years to come. Not because it was impossible, but because she'd proven that impossible was just another word for not yet observed. The transport waited. Quantico beckoned, and Sergeant Maya Chun, the Marine who'd made the shot nobody else could make, headed toward a future built on the capabilities she'd earned and the respect she'd commanded through nothing more than watching the desert until she understood its secrets.